Thank you very much. And thanks for inviting me. Great film, really inspirational, and congratulations to MDCA and indeed to the students who made it. I'm not sure my mic is sufficiently prominent. So I was having a drink with the Queen yesterday evening, as you do, along with 500 other people to celebrate the 50th anniversary of CSV. It's on the badge. And I fell into conversation with a woman who runs a grant-giving charity in the North East, gives away about £2 million a year. And as I was coming here today, I said to her, so what kind of outcome measures do you look for from the recipients of your grants? And she said, well, to be honest, we're not very advanced about all that. But she said, we do always insist on a receipt. if only life was that simple. I think my role today is to set some kind of context for your deliberations, and so I've titled my remarks "Why we need to make impact evaluation, co-produced impact evaluation work." So let's start with this. Who's going to admit to knowing who these fine young gentlemen are? Come on. It's McFly. Very good indeed. Well-known popular music combo for the older ones among us. Why am I showing you a picture of McFly? I'll give you a clue. Anyone got any idea at all? No, I guess not. McFly and indeed Boris are performing on Friday at an event in the Olympic Park called Go Local, marking 1 year since the Olympics and Paralympics, and aiming to celebrate volunteering. As well as listening to the concert, people will be able to get practical advice on involvement in their local community. Go Local says it aims to foster the community spirit, which was a feature of the Games, and help make them such a success. Well, it could be pushing at an open door. According to the people who monitor these things, volunteering and community engagement is on the rise. These are the latest key markers from the government's Community Life Survey, and they're all up. 72% volunteered in the past year, they say. 74% gave to charity in the past 4 weeks. 48% want more involvement in local decisions, and perhaps most crucially, 78% say they feel they belong strongly to their neighbourhood, and that's up from 70% in 2003. Why have we got this trend? The honest answer is we don't know, says Justin Davis-Smith, who heads up volunteering at NCVO. He says it's probably too soon to be talking about a long-term trend, but it is encouraging. Well, one explanation, of course, could be the Olympics and Paralympics effect. I was in Manchester the other day, and getting off the train at Piccadilly, noticed that the meeters and greeters for the Manchester International Festival at the station had very much this kind of snazzy outfit on, with volunteer boldly written across the backs of their tops. And I'm not sure that would have been the case before 2012. But another explanation, of course, at least in part, must be the cuts. We've seen a significant growth in volunteering in services that have taken the deepest cuts, like libraries, where an estimated 1 in 10 is now community run, and 1 in 2 councils is exploring alternative ways of running their their libraries. So volunteering in libraries, but also, of course, on the front desks of police stations and on food banks. Who said there are no exciting new public services around? In my borough, in Barnet, in North London, you can volunteer to pick litter in your street. Freudian slip. And so the council will give you a high-vis jacket and a litter-picking stick and a supply of plastic sacks, if you so choose. And none of this is surprising, given the scale of the cuts. Just look at the extent of central government spending reductions in the non-protected areas, that is, every area except the NHS, schools and international aid. 45% in culture, 60% in Eric Pickle's Communities Department, of which local government's taken a hit of about 35%. And the wonder is that such brutal cuts have really been accepted with such equanimity. And this is Paul Johnson, Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, remarking on that, saying at almost any time in the past 60 years, if we had announcements of cuts of this scale, we'd have had a storm, as would any announcement that 144,000 public sector jobs would go. And indeed, when you look at events on the streets in Brazil, Spain, France and Greece today, general strike in Greece today, you do marvel at the tolerance of the British people. Or perhaps we should marvel at the blind acceptance of a narrative that says such harsh medicine is necessary because of the alleged profligacy and economic incompetence of the last government. But that's probably a discussion we should have another day. Meanwhile, there is worse to come. This is the latest forecast from the IFS, and this was made since the spending review 3 weeks ago. And they're saying there's a looming £25 billion deficit by 2016-18. Why? Well, in brief, the continuing weakness of the economy, coupled with a sharp relative fall in incomes, means that tax revenues are falling well short of what Chancellor George Osborne had planned for. It's that fall in incomes, by the way, that means our national income is plummeting to the extent that even after all these cuts, public spending as a proportion of national income will be about the same in 2017 as it was in 2004. You may recall that the coalition set out, controversially at the time, to recover 80% of its spending deficit from cuts and only 20% from tax rises. Well, as the IFS says, it's failed even to manage that, and we're running so far at 85% from cuts and 15% from tax increases. And it says to restore that 80-20 ratio, taxes would need to rise by about 6 billion, and that's a penny on income tax or 1% on VAT, very, very roughly. But George Osborne said just the other day that he wasn't going to do that. And he said there wouldn't be any tax rises under a Conservative government after 2015. He said this can be delivered through spending and savings, both in welfare and in departments, and there's no need for tax rises to contribute to that fiscal consolidation. And today's opinion poll in our paper, if you've heard about it, gives that added significance because it shows the Conservatives are now level pegging with Labour on 30 6 percentage points, and clearly their prospects of returning to government on that basis are greatly enhanced. So there is what's to come, and even if Labour were to win the next election, they of course have said they would stay within the coalition's cost envelope. They might move some things around, but the overall cost limit would be accepted in the first year of a Labour government. This is what the Local Government Association says is going to happen on their best guess. It's forecasting that councils' total income, including that much reduced government grant and effectively frozen council tax revenue, overall income will fall 15% in cash terms, that's 27% in real terms by 2020, over the decade. If you take out public health money, the extra money that local government has got because public health has been transferred from the NHS, then it's effectively 21% reduction in cash, 32% in real terms. And because spending on waste and social care, children and adult social care, is protected, that implies, protected in law, that implies a 46% cut, almost half of course, in spending for all other services. That infamous Barnett graph of doom that you may have heard about, suggesting that only waste and social care will be left before very much longer. That looks now not too far off coming to pass. Which would be all bad enough were it not for another factor: our ageing population. Meeting the care and support needs of older people is a huge, unprecedented challenge. And as the recent report by Lord Geoffrey Filkin's Special House of Lords Committee of Inquiry discovered, we are, in their words, woefully underprepared for that challenge. You'll be familiar with the figures. Numbers of people over 85 rising from about 1.3 million in 2007 to 3.3 million in 2033. Life expectancy, this is the government said this last week apropos the royal birth. They said boys born this week can expect to live to almost 91, girls to almost 94, and at least 1 in 3 will live to 100. And I think for the royal baby that's pretty much a dead certainty. And this is the most amazing thing. Life expectancy is rising 5 hours every day. So it's almost inconceivable. Life expectancy is rising 5 hours a day. Not yours and mine, but the life expectancy of newborn babies. Some would argue that's not going to carry on, and we're actually reaping the benefits of the better diet that the wartime generation and the rationing generation had, and the later generations like mine that have eaten a lot of sugar will in fact not be living that much longer. The projection will tail off, but that's a debate. At the moment, that's the trend: 5 hours every day. And of course, this is not a bad news story. Rising life expectancy is a wonderful thing, and many of us will live fit and active lives deep into our 70s, 80s, even 90s, and will be making a hugely important contribution to the economy. WRVS, now called the RVS, calculate that the contribution of older people was £40 billion in 2010, and by 2030 it will be £75 billion. So this is a great news story. But we cannot gloss over the care and support needs of many older people. Already 7 in 10 people who live in care homes have some form of dementia, and these figures, this doubling of people with dementia to almost 1.5 million by 2030 means that hundreds of thousands of people with dementia won't be in residential settings. They'll be in the community, and we'll all need to become accustomed to their presence in the street, in shops, in cafes, in our own family homes. Over 65s may be very active, but 3 in 4 will need some form of care at some point in their older years. And the number of us living with 3 or more long-term conditions, things like asthma, diabetes, COPD, mental health problems, is set to rise by 1 million by 2018. Already older people account for 2/3 of all hospital bed use. It's simply unsustainable to expect the hospital system to absorb this kind of growth. And the imperative is to find ways of supporting older people living with chronic conditions in their own homes, in the community. And just as a sort of an aside, it's not just older people's care that is a challenge. Many council social care directors and finance chiefs will tell you it's not the cost of supporting older people that keeps them awake at night, it's the cost of supporting people with a learning disability. Their numbers are growing at about 5% a year. As more babies are born with disabilities, more survive into childhood and more happily live much longer lives. Again, a great success story for our society, but one that carries a very significant price tag. Can the social care system cope? No. It's already vast, much vaster than most people think. A contribution to the economy of at least £43 billion a year, according to Skills for Care, the sector skills agency, and more workers than the NHS. Not many people realise that. 1.5 million workers in social care in about 1.7 million jobs. Although, of course, we've been hearing a lot lately about how many domiciliary care workers, people who give care in your own home, are effectively paid below the minimum wage because they're not paid for travel between jobs. Low pay is endemic in the sector, and the squeeze on council funding means that there's no prospect of significantly more money getting into the system via the state. Social care directors say they will have taken 20% out of their budgets by next year. And the funding gap, 2 billion, 3 billion, who knows, is not about to be closed. Notwithstanding the coalition's smuggling of some money across from the NHS, though the 3.8 billion pot that the Chancellor announced for 2015 3 weeks ago, that kind of money does start to get into serious territory. There is, of course, the Dilnot Care funding reform, or a watered-down version of it, now in Parliament in the Care Bill, scheduled to take effect in 2016. But this is the judgment of Lord Lipsey, who's a care costs expert and a supporter of the plan, supporter of the Dilnot plan. And he says, I think it's wonderful we're spending £1 billion to help richer people not to be wiped out by their care costs, but it's not as great a thing as it would be if we were providing the money to local authorities properly to look after and provide basic services to people who need them, etc., etc. Enough said on that, I think. So we cannot look to the state to meet the care and support needs of our ageing population. We must look to our own communities. We must look to them to do more, much more, for people across the age spectrum as formal public services withdraw, as I've described, and as Penny said, to build that resilience so that communities can help themselves. But I think it's the singular and present nature of the demographic challenge which gives this such urgency and, in my view, priority. This is not a new thought. While Lord Filkin's strictures about our lack of preparedness for the ageing population are very well deserved, some people have been thinking about this for some time, some more far-sighted than others. This was David Blanket back in 2008. In my view, he said we should be looking to reinforce the responsibility and capability of the family and the immediate community to continue helping themselves. I myself wrote a report for the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, again in 2008, called Care and Support at Community Responsibility, arguing that neighbours, not just family carers, would have to play a key role in welfare and well-being provision in future. That sank, not entirely without trace, but I can't pretend it did much to shake the complacency of the establishment. But politicians do now seem to be getting the message. You may have heard Norman Lamb, the Care and Support Minister, yesterday talking about a neighbourhood watch scheme to support older people living in the community. He actually unveiled this idea at an event at The Guardian about 2 weeks ago, and this is what he said. I want to explore how we can reawaken communities' natural volunteer spirit to help provide an extra layer of support for older people, tapping into the energy in communities, bridging the gap between generations, encouraging everyone to help avoid leaving people lonely and isolated. It's all very laudable stuff, and most right-minded people would sign up to the principle, but would they do it in practice? You may have seen these figures before, from a slightly different but parallel context. When polled, 82% of people said they liked the idea of expanding community partnerships. 26% said they might even get involved themselves. When it came to it, only 2% do actually do something to get involved. That may be something you're very familiar with, and maybe we'd get a different result this side of the Olympics, the Olympic effect, or perhaps not. But let me offer you 3 quick examples of what I'm talking about. The Casserole Club, home-cooked food made by neighbours for neighbours. Do something great with an extra plate. Sorry, it's their line, not mine. Conceived by the FutureGov organisation as a new type of Meals on Wheels, perhaps a service for the post-public services era. It's a very simple idea, pairing up people prepared to cook an extra portion of a meal with neighbours who may be old or disabled and greatly appreciate that meal. So the organisation carries out basic checks, makes the initial introduction online or indeed offline, and deals with things like complaints about the quality of the food. Apparently people do complain. It's been piloted in Surrey and now on the ground with funding from Nesta in 2 London boroughs, Tower Hamlets, and indeed in Barnet, where I live. And it's building up interest elsewhere. My anecdotal evidence from Barnet is that it does seem to be getting some traction, some profile, and although the numbers are very small still, it's showing some promising signs. Secondly, Viv and Miriam, this comes from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation's A Better Life project, which has been looking at how we might better support older people with high support needs. And a final report on this project is due out in September, I think, or October. Viv is a single mum in her 20s. Miriam is a 91-year-old neighbour whom she helps with showering, shopping and picking up things around the house. And as she says, as Viv says on the slide, it's actually a two-way relationship. And Viv talks very positively about what she gets from Miriam. And she says this about what the wider community gets. And I think it's just worth hearing this at some length. She says, Miriam is the reason why all us neighbours still have a relationship. We're a little community because of her need and our need to be needed. It's quite beautiful, really, she says. Marjorie up the road always gives her offcuts of meat and has her up to her house once a week, and they share magazines. And in turn, Marjorie still feels a sense of community in the street. Dave does odd jobs, and in turn has not wasted away in retirement. Sally, the daughter of one of Miriam's friends, fills in her catalogue orders, picks up bits from the co-op, and can talk to Miriam about her mother who's passed away. And together we have a very understated relationship that only felt its value when Miriam went into hospital and we were all thrown back into our own corners. I think that's a remarkably perceptive and significant reflection. 1 minute left? I'll have to hurry. Some communities I recognise may need an incentive to do this kind of thing. I'm involved in an advisory capacity with this scheme called DEREC, Developing and Empowering Resources in Communities, which I think is a hugely exciting idea because it's the original win-win. Already on the ground in Leeds, Sandwell and Belfast, just secured £1 million from Big Society Capital, and will shortly be inviting other partner areas. In brief, local community groups undertake to provide the care and support for older people who might otherwise be in residential care or hospital. In return, they receive a dividend calculated from the savings on those residential care costs, which can be invested in community facilities. On the 6 initial projects, the projected savings are 20%, or £6 million, which is split 50-50 between the council and the project. Because of the structural upheaval in the NHS, health savings haven't yet been factored into this, but they will be. Norman Lamb, the Minister, has said this is a glimpse of the future. But exciting in the interests of ministers, local politicians and funders getting their meaningful backing are two different things. Being able to demonstrate the outcomes of the project, to tick those right boxes, is these days essential, which is why, of course, you're all here today. As Michael said, we need evidence-based policy. I won't get into the detail of impact evaluation, run out of time, can't do anything else. But that's for others who are far more knowledgeable and expert than I. But let me just offer a couple of questions. I suppose the need to demonstrate impact evaluation has sort of grown since the advent of the contract culture in the 1990s, but it's not been a consistent trend. Voluntary and community groups have faced shifting, sometimes very confusing demands to monitor and report back on their work. Commissioners are these days very interested in community-wide change, and I just pose that question. That's a sort of macro effect, measured in things like improving reoffending rates, obesity levels, teenage pregnancy. I'm out of time, I must hurry to a close. But local groups, of course, are focused on very micro neighbourhood things, and sometimes it's difficult to make that transition. We also need to drill down the depth of analysis, which bits worked, which precise bits worked, and in what way and for whom. Funders, particularly in this austerity area, want to know just what works, but not just what works, but what particular elements work best. Then there's the challenge of quantifying that kind of relationship. Vivian, Miriam, how on earth do you quantify that? And the technical skill set is such now for these demands that even Nick Hurd, the Minister, has said, my concern is that this is becoming too complicated for the sector. So my hope is that the work in Newhaven, which we're hearing about today, will answer some of these and other questions. I certainly look forward to hearing about it. This, finishing now, this, as some of you may recognise, is Hazel Stuteley. She was a health visitor who found herself working on the Beacon estate in Falmouth, in one of the most deprived estates in the UK, with the initial help of 5 local residents. She said they didn't much look like a group that was going to change the world, but they did. She and her colleagues set about transforming things, huge success, but they didn't think to measure it. As she said later, the number crunchers asked us, what are your outcomes? Well, we haven't counted anything. We were too busy doing it. When they did count, they proved a 50% drop in crime, 100% improvement in educational attainment, 71% fall in unemployment, etc., etc. The rest is history. The Beacon Project is now held out as a model of its kind. And very finally, this is Gloria Foster, who died in her flat in Surrey, aged 81, after the UK Border Agency raided the company that supplied her care workers and closed it down. No one thought to check on her welfare, as someone who arranged her own care rather than having provided through the local authority. Her old friend Anne Penston blamed herself for not having visited, as Gloria lay effectively abandoned, though she did visit once and I thought that Gloria was asleep. But Anne said this about the decline of the local community. I can remember people, she said, standing by their gates and talking to people as they came home from work. People don't sit in their front gardens now, they sit in their back gardens. It seems to me that one way or another, metaphorically speaking, we have to get people into their front gardens once again. Thank you very much.